Jeff, we had a chat a little while ago now, and it was a good conversation. It was kind of like whetting the appetite, and I thought I built let's say a bit of a banquet. Got the entree, got a little bit of the meat and potatoes, which we'll get into, I guess, Monochrome and Bitcoin and a few other things, and then I've got some desserts, a couple of sweet things to see if we can entice people. But I'm going to start with a story that I just gathered from someone just quite recently that I wanted to probably begin with, which was you riding around YEW and the Bitcoin plates. Now, where was the fascination or the idea that came around with getting the Bitcoin plates?
It was a couple of years ago. I think it's quite a popular car at one point at the Stalker Space, which is a Facebook group for YEW students, alumni, and people was like, "Who the hell does this belong to?" And I think nobody figured out it was me until much later. But the Bitcoin plate was just fun. Like, I love Bitcoin, so naturally, and I figured out that you can actually have the combination from the transport department. I got it. I put it on my car back then. I don't think it was too notorious of a car. It was a BMW coupe, a white one. So it was driving around Brisbane. I was still taking courses at YEW, so it was parked there. In fact, one of my team members here that works in my operations team, like, he knows my car before he met me. And
by the plate or by the car, right?
Yeah, everybody that is into Bitcoin YEW back then would have seen the car, or get excited about it. The plate. The thing about the plate is that it attracts a lot of attention, not the car actually. You can put a plate on a McLaren and people will be more excited about the Bitcoin plate than the McLaren. To be honest, it's too much. It got too much, and it was before the 2017 run up, so it was not like when most people have already known about Bitcoin. So it's early 2017 was where I spent a lot of time on the road in that car. Got a few people chasing down the car, and every junction you see, you come to a red light stop, your cameras will come out, and you guys, someone's taking a photo of the car, and then you got kids like shouting at your car saying Bitcoin and things like that. And to a point, I just thought that it was just too much attention. I just took down the plate. I swapped into something more inconspicuous. When I had a McLaren, I put it back on because not many cars can carry the plate because the plate ends up carrying the car because of how loud it is. So the McLaren 765 LT was one car that I thought that, it could wear the plate. It's worthy enough.
It matches the plate, yeah. Plate matches the car at the very least.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a cool experience driving around with the Bitcoin McLaren. People love it. And being in a McLaren, you don't get much hate compared to, say, if you put a Bitcoin plate on a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. I love Ferrari and Lamborghini, but for some reason people just think that you're a bit of a...
That's an interesting one. Do you think it's because
it's
the people probably don't see the McLaren as being the car that people would buy as being the showy off car? It's a more of a, that probably identifies someone who maybe understands supercars more or is a more refined taste to the general pop.
Yeah, well, I think because Ferrari and Lamborghini have a much broader audience base, right? You can't deny that, especially with the history of Ferrari and also with Lamborghini. They've just been making supercars longer than McLaren has. So when someone rocks up in a McLaren, they usually are people that likes the car, because and then you're a bit geeky on this kind of stuff, and you tend to find a lot of stigmatization of McLaren drivers to be tech CEOs or tech bros, right? And then with Lamborghinis, you have a mix of people that just likes the V12s and the V10s, and or people that just like to flash and go to the clubs, picking up a Lambo. Well, it's the reason why Lamborghini is very popular in rap culture and pop culture. Same with Ferrari, right? Ferrari just have such a prestige behind it. Like a lot of supercars, but Ferrari is just on another level in terms of their fan base. If you go to any race event, if there's Ferrari racing there, you got people dressed in red with flags, everything, and that's just a different type of fan base. So I guess you have bigger pool of people, and people tend to think Ferrari owners are a bit snobbish, which is not true. I mean, there's good and bad people all over, and there's just somehow there's this the stigmatization that it's tied to each of the brand. And you got a Porsche drivers, and you think that you're a financial advisor or someone that would drive it, or accountant that would drive.
I was going to say precision, accuracy, exactly. The traditional accountant. Yep.
Yeah. So like you don't a tech CEO driving a 911 just doesn't feel right. If you drive some McLaren, nobody bats an eye.
Now I'm going to put a little pause on the car conversation, because there's a few things I want to get to at the very tail end that people can tune in, because you got GT4 there, Australia. So I want to get into some of those details as well as general car questions at the end. But I guess that gives individuals now a bit of an idea. Okay, that sounds like Jeff, and I'm going to reflect back to the original conversation that we had as well, if you want to find out a little bit more of some of the background for yourself. But to try to get, as we're getting into the meat and potatoes of some of this conversation, I want to ask you the signal or information. Now, prior to this conversation, right, I know that you previously had looked into, or you're studying architecture, and the way that I might inform myself of something quite interesting, I'd go into Google, I type in, architecture, mathematic principles, I might find things like tessellation, Fibonacci, numbers, the golden ratio, and that's how I would get information myself. In this day and age, how do you yourself personally, or Monochrome in general, go about finding the signal in the noise, or the information that is valid to be aware of? Case in point, we had the Russian coup not too long ago, and we were doing this conversation in July. That was a big hurrah of information, and then it kind of ended up petering out, and the reality of what it was probably wasn't the same as what the media portrayed it to be. How do you go about understanding information that's coming in and batting away the noise?
I guess there's two parts of it. The one part of it is the technical aspects of Bitcoin. People ask about, what if this happens to Bitcoin, or any technical questions about Bitcoin. They usually have been answered in the past. There are a lot of technical forums like Bitcoin Talk back in the days. You got Jameson's Lop's website, for example, and then we have Monochrome Research, which is our talented team of researchers that goes into the idiosyncrasies, to risk, to ESG, to regulation in Australia when it comes to the asset class. So those are kind of resources that I rely on, mostly. Well, over the years, you kind of learn more and more, and you don't stop learning. But if I want to know something technical about Bitcoin, like, you have to go down into the rabbit hole. You just can't read, say, anything about you don't trust anything technical about Bitcoin from Forbes or anything, right? Because the writers may have a view on Bitcoin, or their biases on Bitcoin, but they are not there to in the early stage of the Bitcoin to see what the reasoning of having certain rules in place, or having certain maybe they read it as a flaw. It might be a reason why it's introduced there, like block size limit and all this kind of things. So that is sort of where I think you should not really read the evening news about Bitcoin if you really want to understand how it works. Like the geeks or the proper research houses that does all this kind of stuff is probably where I would go to. The other one is just the market updates, right? There's all this constant news about new developments, world events that can impact Bitcoin or relevant to Bitcoin. Even the BlackRock news, the BlackRock files Bitcoin ETF became one of the biggest news in a while that we have. And maybe next day Monochrome files a Bitcoin ETF. Maybe by the time this episode goes out, you guys would have heard about it already. So these are the news that are curated by our team of researchers and our marketing department. So we look through the news sources, make sure it's valid. Go into the SEC filing, things that are sort of public registers that you can refer to, and you kind of go deep into it, because there's a lot of people on Twitter that sometimes they might say something that's not true, that's not backed by anything, just to get likes and retweets. And also there are people that want to push an agenda, so they might fluff up something when it's not really that big of a deal, or they might misconstrue what the original context of it. So I think Fidelity does have a very good team to produce content about Bitcoin, and on the updates we do monthly recap commentaries and all this kind of stuff, and our fund reports on our website, even on LinkedIn, at Monochrome. So those are the kind of sources that I would say just stick with, and just ignore the Telegram groups, the Discord groups. Like everyone's there to push an agenda, try to sell you a viewpoint, when they are totally unregulated. Whereas there are being a regulated player and person that is very close in his action, there's actually a lot of things that you don't do. Like, for example, try to spruik your way out of something that is not true, or not the actual context of it, just to try to make something look better, because that's still, as regulated players, we'll get into a lot of trouble if we do that.
Absolutely. And so just to even press on the information and the sources, right? Because I know that you recently posted something, and no names here, where, I think it was a year ago, you went to another, invited by someone to another wealth manager, I believe. They were spruiking, hey, Bitcoin? No, that's going to zero. That's not going to work. And I'm sure you could find many different sources. Now, to many people, that viewpoint of a different wealth manager, there would have been enough authority or placing behind the weight of what they're saying for people to believe that is real. Beyond, I guess, or maybe for people, for individuals, for entities to go, okay, Monochrome research, or insert something else. Where exactly would people place the authority for you guys to say, oh no, you're bringing something that is unbiased, as opposed to, okay, yes, but that's favoring what Monochrome Bitcoin is looking for, right? Is for people to actually invest in Bitcoin. How does that differentiate, or even for that example, go, okay, you can have influence. How do people trust, either with the research house in-house or just general information, that it's the right authority? That's the sort of authority that they should be looking for in data sources or information.
Yeah. So the story was actually just that I got this client that wanted to meet because he's in town. And there's actually an event that he's attending. That's why he's down in Brisbane. So there was a wealth management company and firm that he has dealings with, and he's like, oh, meet me there before this thing starts, and do something. So I sat there and listened, because it's like, cool, maybe I'll just learn a bit. And honestly, it was at the car dealership, so I wasn't that eager of leaving either. So I had a listen, and the guy was basically, I don't know why Bitcoin was even mentioned, because he was not even talking anything about Bitcoin or any products that's offered under Bitcoin. But I just guessed that the presenter thought it was topical, and they say something about Bitcoin is going to zero, and it believes that no one's going to take it seriously, and then hence why they're not focusing on this stuff. And I didn't do anything. I just didn't confront or anything. But usually when someone has formed a viewpoint on Bitcoin that is just so misconstrued, and they're so confident about it, yet you kind of leave them alone, because there's really no point going back and forth with people that has formed a very strong cognitive bias against Bitcoin, because today's day and age, there's so much information out there about Bitcoin. There's so much signal and validations from even some of the biggest asset managers in the world, and most respected traditional finance players that are backing the asset class and calling it a legitimate asset class now, and plus all the resources that we talked about that people can freely get onto. And if people still think such a horrible backward view on Bitcoin, it's not that they don't have the information. It's usually, I find, that they just refuse to believe, they refuse to want to learn about it. So if they have formed that view, that's fine. People have the choices. But I think sort of where it kind of irks me is that, well, people like that have been placed themselves in the position of trust amongst their clients, and just giving out really bad stuff that doesn't age well, right? And I think it's not necessarily that you need to correct them either, because their clients know, right? It's like, there's a reason why he called me there. And the clients eventually will realize that, hold on a second, like, my advisor's been telling me Bitcoin is a Ponzi game, garbage, yada yada, for like years and years. I believe in the beginning, but after all this stuff with BlackRock, with Fidelity, with JP Morgan, it's like, with all this stuff that's happening, and it's like, and are you still thinking that? Like, are you sure? Like, and he will start questioning that whether there's any biases in that, or whether they're actually acting in the best interest of their clients to go into, to really understand the asset class, to make a decision to like it or dislike it. Because as fiduciaries of other people's assets and trusts indirectly, like, to make a decision to invest and not invest requires equal amount of research and consideration when choosing anything, whether Bitcoin or real estate or anything. So if someone forms a mindset that is just Bitcoin is bad and nothing that can convince me otherwise, and I'm just keep rejecting all this news about stuff like, going through the stages of grief. It's funny to see some of these, some of these, eventually they walk out of that shadow. They kind of want to learn and help their clients succeed, because I believe that they're not bad people. They might have a bad experience with Bitcoin, I don't know, or they just don't like Bitcoin because, some life experience that they've encountered.
It might just be that they missed out on the ride up as well, right? They just go, hey, there's been a lot of success. I wasn't part of it.
Yeah, but there's a lot of stuff like that. Like, there's a lot of people that miss, say, Apple, miss Amazon, miss Tesla, but people don't have the same hate towards that compared to some of the traditional players that are just completely just cannot wrap their minds around how BlackRock would enter the space into Bitcoin. It's like, to them, like, that they just don't believe the news is true. Like, we send out newsletters, we get funny responses. Some people like it, some people's like, this is great. Like, we look at our people just opening the emails a lot, and sometimes you can see that, and there are people just replying with funny messages of it's like, so it's like, stop trying to sell your shit and everything. Like, don't contact me again. We're not gonna touch Bitcoin. Like, we only do mainstream asset classes. Funnily, the irony about it is, like, we're sending more mainstream about BlackRock, and we're not even adding any of our flavor into it. We just tell you exactly what it is, what the state of things are in the US, what the state of things here in Australia. What can you do to be prepared? And here are the links you can check out for more information. And people get so triggered. You don't believe that some people are just. I mean, like, we don't fault them. Like, if this is probably plays in psychology. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychology major or anything. I can't read into exactly why and help them out. Maybe they should talk to their therapist and not replying to
replying back an email to Monochrome to lay out the woes.
I know it sounds a bit rude, but it's just I feel like people, as fiduciaries, we just need to not let our own cognitive biases against anything else prevent us from delivering the best outcomes for our clients, which is the best interest of them. Like, everything we do it in the best interest of our clients, not like what I want my client to invest and what I don't like, so I don't let my client even look into it. Because over time, if they cannot deliver that service and it becomes more and more demanded, people are going to go somewhere else. They know that, well, if every time I ask Jeff about Bitcoin, he sort of like closes the door on me, and it's like, and then 2 months later you saw this news about BlackRock, you want to learn more about Bitcoin, like, chances are you go to someone else and not me anymore. So if they continue to stonewall and hide and not wanting to see that this is something that they should consider in any aspects, and not hide behind excuses of why they cannot touch it or why they don't want to touch it, there's actually a lot of ways that they already can access the product, and that will probably be a better outcome if they come together and work with us. Because some do. There's not everyone is bad. I mean, we do good examples of people that just are engaging, from our CBD content to our products and things like that, and events. They come to, like, we like to do a lot of online, offline stuff as well, because we know with Bitcoin, it's a lot of education required, a lot of trust. It's like, why they should trust Bitcoin as an asset class, and more importantly, why they should trust Monochrome to help them into this journey. So, but some people want to be helped, some people don't want to be helped. That's fine. People have their own choices, but they have to take responsibility of that later on. And
let's tackle that piece of trust. Right, we're gonna get into the meat and potatoes here, but I'm gonna go at a different view that I think sometimes people ask it, and hopefully works out. So I'll take a little bit of time as I ask this question so you can process it through, and it's to do with freedom. So I kind of want to understand from your perspective, Jeff, what does freedom look like to you, right, as an individual, right, as a mere mortal? Specifically for people who don't know, you've got a background Malaysian. Yeah, I know that you went to school in Singapore, I believe, and so then you've been in Australia sort of ever since. So first of all, what does freedom look like to you, and then how does Bitcoin in itself then help support that view of a world of freedom? So I want to try to tackle this slightly away from the asset class and, hey, money goes up, number goes up, and what it means, because there's the reality of, well, again, against what, and the comparison against do you want $1 million Zimbabwean dollars, right? There's a differentiation here. So I guess that two-pronged question, and tackle it as you want. Freedom, and then how does Bitcoin actually support that view of a world with freedom?
Yeah. So I guess that's a good question. It gives a lot of places to reflect on what freedom actually is. I actually thought about this a while ago, and I think that like freedom is a very subjective concept, right? It's a made up concept. You know, some people feel free in a prison cell. Some people don't feel free living in a mansion in their Rolls Royce. It's very subjective, and I think that it comes down to like the choices that you think you have or you have. For example, there are things that are unrealistic. So it's like I don't feel free unless I turn into a unicorn. It's like biologically that's impossible. So you will never feel free.
Yeah, good luck with that.
If your condition is that. But if you go like, if you don't have that expectation, you go like, I'm free if I can have 3 meals a day and I go back to see my kids and my wife's at home waiting for me, or she's successful in her job, I'm successful in my job, and that's what you're looking for, and that's fine, right? But I think that a lot of why people are unhappy about their current situation is really the expectation is really correlated to that. And like some people living in really what we perceive as poverty, but they're happy because they don't expect a lot of stuff. Like they have everything they need. Like they don't really want the next shiny thing, or they don't really crave to drive a Porsche or a Ferrari. It doesn't matter to them. So like it is freedom. They live freedom. If you put them into and force them, is like you should have this, you should have that, or society tells you that you should get 2 jobs and this, and so you can afford a Ferrari. Like then that's not freedom. Like even though there's someone else's opinion, but if you get influenced by the expectations externally, then you're creating the prison for yourself. I think Bitcoin is just an option as well for people to consider. It's not a forced thing. No one's forcing anyone to use Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin doesn't rely on any one of us to
doesn't care.
Doesn't care.
Yep.
Like it's a collective network. So giving people a freedom of choice to select the way that they want to save in, or the way they want to invest, or the way that they want to transact, or the monetary belief that they want to put trust on, rather than say I'm trusting the Egyptian government to hold up the monetary policy so that my money is safe or my money doesn't get devalued, versus I trust the Bitcoin code or the Bitcoin network and a network of nodes. Like, well, some people choose the other one or the other. That's fine. It's their own choice. But with freedom comes responsibility. If you choose your worldview, what freedom is, then you got to take that responsibility, right? It's like you can't choose, say Bitcoin, and then you actually only like the aspect of decentralization, but you don't like the volatility, and you don't want to learn how to manage the volatility, and then you go like, I like decentralized, assets, monetary assets, but it's so volatile, I hate it. Then you gotta take responsibility. There's ways to reduce and prevent that, or just completely sit out of it, right? And the same thing with fiat currencies. Like, I like the aspect where it's everywhere I go, it accepts my credit cards and my Australian dollars, but I don't, if I can't live with the fact that my money can be confiscated or deflated or inflated away like it did in Lebanon. So a horrible situation with what's happening there. Then if I can live with that, that's fine. I take the responsibility. If I can't live with that, then I got to figure out, take a plan B or something, right?
And you touched on a couple of good points where when I first, now you've probably been around Bitcoin, I believe 10 or so years at this point, right? Myself, much less so. But one of the aspects that I never got until very recently was the conversation around freedom, the malleability of moving things around, the control. And that kind of leads me to a question where still a lot of individuals, perhaps not entities, because they might be able to get this information and sources a little bit differently, but to quite, the individuals, the mums and pops, whoever, there's a conversation about regulation and the regulation and the management of things. And I wanted to, and this will lead us into Monochrome, to understand how does it differentiate for most people in terms of if you hold Bitcoin, and let's say you've just determined that Bitcoin is the thing that you want to hold, part of it as an asset by freedom, or because of the asset class might be a good investment, whatever the case may be. Holding it, at least in Australia, in a exchange, holding it as your own keys, holding the actual Bitcoin itself as your own keys, and then holding it with something like Monochrome. What do people perhaps not understand around regulations? In fact, as most people sometimes don't even know that there are regulations in Australia that we have to sort of look at. Can you talk me through those three different examples, and probably what are people missing and what does Monochrome offer that perhaps the other two don't, or the reason why people might be going towards a Monochrome as opposed to some of the others?
So with Bitcoin, it's an asset class that you can what they call self-custody. So you take the responsibility of the security of the asset. Usually you would write the seed phrases down like a password that you store, and hopefully you don't lose it, because if you lose it, there's no central team of Bitcoin because it's centralized. So there's no central team or hotline you can call to recover your Bitcoin. So it's lost forever. That is one of the strengths of Bitcoin, is that you don't have a central authority in the middle to oversee the transaction or the settlement of the asset and the security asset. So it's truly a non-human involved in terms of the chain of governance. There's no human involved in that, and that's why people like Bitcoin. Well, then you'll have to take responsibility of, like, if you are the custodian of your own Bitcoin. If you something happens to you and you lose the keys, and if you become reckless or you become uncareful or you didn't do it properly, then if you lose the Bitcoin, you can't blame anybody, right? So with exchanges, which crypto exchanges, like, I don't really like to call them exchanges, because like exchange implies like a really big financial market, usually like ASX or a NASDAQ or a FTSE. That's what right? So like the New York Stock Exchange, like those are exchanges. Mm-hmm. But crypto exchanges are just trading platforms or brokerages mostly. And they're not regulated in Australia. It's not saying that they're illegal, because illegal and not regulated are two different things, right? Something can be unregulated but not illegal. For example, I'm just assuming it, but let's say the helmet trading market, it's not illegal, but there's also no regulation around it. So if someone screws you with the sale of the helmet, probably there's regulation around the safety of it, but maybe the sale or trading of the helmets, no one really cares, so there's no government oversight. And if something happens to you, it's your own thing. Right? You acknowledge that it's unregulated. Like Facebook marketplaces, if I buy stuff there, if I get robbed, like, I can go to the police and everything, but I can't go to a financial watchdog and say that, hey, I got screwed over. Doesn't happen, because it's not illegal, but it's also not regulated. Crypto exchanges have the same regulatory coverage as much as Facebook Marketplace. Like, it's just a marketplace with no regulation that is currently applicable to them. Some argue that most crypto exchanges and brokerages would die if they actually adhere to the regulation as they would a proper exchange like the ASX, because the cost of compliance is so high that people don't realize how difficult it is to actually run a regulated product. So in the case of like FTX, like, and after the implosion, you see that there's a lot of governance shortfall. People didn't do this. People didn't even know that this is happening. And these are the things that are part of a result, that when there's no regulatory oversight, there's no requirements before, and there's also no procedures to follow if things blows up. So, but I think a lot of people do not understand that crypto exchanges and brokerages, trading platforms, are unregulated in Australia, because a lot of them market themselves like they are regulated, or and somehow they get the trust from their customers, like the customers would have with their banks, or some customers would trust some of these crypto trading platforms more than their banks, which is quite insane to think about. It's a strange concept. Because like one is entirely unregulated and one is regulated by APRA and by ASIC, by all the letterheads, right? So there's a lot of oversight that goes into that, and it might be a bit restrictive. There's a lot of things you can't do. Like you can't do bad stuff over there. They will close your accounts. But in an unregulated exchange, it's really much self-regulatory. So everyone has their own set of rules. Like some crypto trading platforms might require to submit one ID, and the other guy is like, no, I want 3 IDs, and some guys will say that I want to face liveness check. Or there's certain KYC requirements that falls under AUSTRAC, which is for crypto trading platforms in Australia, but that's just for the anti-money laundering part of it. What I said about being unregulated is that there is no financial law like you would from a fund or from a stock or any financial asset that is regulated that you have a recourse to. So you don't have a dispute resolution right. If something goes wrong, you can't sue. There are usually no right on the asset that are on these platforms either. If you read the terms and conditions, they're usually structured in a way that you are just an unsecured creditor. So there are implications on whether an SMSF should actually even legally can hold their crypto on a crypto trading platform on a brokerage, because it doesn't satisfy the absolute entitlement clause what the ATO would expect them as trustees. And they can go deeper into that. But the problem is that a lot of these unregulated players are putting themselves and acting like they are in a position of trust when they're actually not, and not having the right disclosures. So when things blow up, then people get upset. It's like, why did I know about this? And why did you say this? Before this goes, a day before your collapse, you told me everything was safe. Well, they can tell you anything because they're unregulated. They can get away with it. But in a regulated product, in a regulated instrument, people can go to jail for doing exactly what a lot of these crypto players like Sam Bankman-Fried and all these guys are doing, because there are rules in place just to prevent the loss of retail money's assets and all this kind of hoo-ha that comes after bad governance. It's just more preventive than anything. But also, if things falls out, there is a resolution scheme, there's insurance, there's ways for you to sue, there's ways for you to get the executives accountable, and most importantly, there's probably ways that you can get your money back. Whereas if you lose it in Celsius or 3 arrows, then goodbye to your money, and you cannot do anything about it. So a fund like the Monochrome Bitcoin Trust is a retail fund. So a retail fund is also very different from a wholesale fund. Like in Australia or in any regulatory jurisdictions, the financial regulator treats retail clients with a lot of paternal care versus wholesale clients or accredited investors, because there is the logic of, wholesale clients or accredited investors, they are sophisticated, they understand the risk, they know better research, and they can take more risks, and they have, if things blows up, they're fine, right? For example, if if 10 billionaires lose $1 million each, people can still people lose their heads, and it's bad, but it's not going to be the end of it. People do not have to live on the streets as a consequence. But if for the same amount of money, but spread smaller to a wider base of retail clients, like if that happens, like if say 10 million retail clients loses $1 each, or maybe just a million retail clients loses $10 each, the financial implications are actually bigger. Well, not a right example, but you get my point, right? So like the decision to be more paternal and the overwatch that you would on a retail product keeps higher than a wholesale product. The wholesale product operates what we call a caveat emptor practice, which is buyers beware. As long as I agree to the risk, to the disclosures that you've given me, then we can do business. But with retail products, you have to meet all the ticks and checks that you would, because the regulator sets the rules that you follow, and then the retail clients understand those rules, and you can't discount, you can't make up new rules to lower your standards to make it easier for you to launch the product and things like that. So the Monochrome Bitcoin Trust is Australia's first crypto asset licensed retail fund that holds Bitcoin on a direct fund level. What it means is that it is the only product in the market till today, as a point of recording, is that it is the AFSL that issues the product has a specific crypto asset. This is actually the term, a license category added to the license. So it has to go through a whole, like a 9-month long process with the regulator to get the license revision approved. So it looks through at the competency, the adequacy, and all the risks involved, and the custody things and all this stuff to get the product and the scheme approved. So it is a very, very long time consuming.
There's a reason why others out there might be like, okay, I'm going to shy away from this. It takes time,
and you got to get insurance. To get insurance, you think it's just like calling up your RACQ, no way, no one insures financial services and businesses easily, no matter crypto or not. So with digital assets, it's even harder to get insurance for professional indemnity PI cover, but we managed to get it. We put up a very good pack and disclosures, and let people see that there's actually very little risk of covering PI for us. So we managed to get all this stuff ticked off. So it's a very long process. So it's like just try. You think you just try to cross something, right? It's like, in order to do this, you got to do that. But in order to do that, you got to do this. It's like 1,000 things that you got to tick off before you actually do the thing that you wanted to do. So we managed to do all that in the span of like 2 years or more. But the benefit of that for the market is that now Australia have a properly regulated financial instrument or product that has exposure to Bitcoin, and there's all these protections in place that a investor would enjoy, like any retail product, any financial product. So you can arguably say that it's not as pure as self-custody, but not many people can do self-custody in this day and age, or not many people bother, and not many people want to touch unregulated services because they know the risk on that, and maybe some they are happy but not going to dip their toes too much. So a regulated product just opens up a new wave of investors that are previously just on the sidelines on the asset class. So I think it's good, you get people into the asset class in a way that they're familiar, they're comfortable, it's protected. You lose a lot of the flexibility on an unregulated product, obviously, but that is just a consequence of operating within the regulatory perimeter. But I think overall you need a variety of operators, but we all have to work truthfully. Even in the marketing languages, we cannot be spruiking up ourselves to be seen as we are regulated, but we're actually not, the kind of stuff, because you see what happened to FTX. Effectively, they've convinced a lot of the non-financially trained, sort of financial professionally trained people that they are regulated. And some of these are big VCs, some of these people are like basketball stars and whatnot. But a lot of retail clients just think that they're regulated. But, when the thing blow up, it's like, which regulation do they adhere to? Nothing. And there are chat logs of SBF just making fun of regulators. So I think it's very important to break away from the concept that because Bitcoin is decentralized, it doesn't need regulation, which is very wrong, because the decentralization of Bitcoin has nothing to do with the protection on the services that are on top of Bitcoin, right? It's like gold itself is unregulated. Like there's no one, maybe you can say God, creates gold and make sure that properties of gold stays like gold, but there's no regulation around the actual asset, but there's a regulation around how you sell gold to people, right?
Gotcha.
How you run a bullion storage facility or a gold ETF, for example. So they argue, a lot of people argue that, this doesn't apply to Bitcoin because it's decentralized. It doesn't apply to crypto because decentralized. They have to see that these are separate. The asset level and the product level, they are very different.
So just make sure I get this right. This would be kind of the equivalent of saying that the attributes of, say, gold or Bitcoin, say Bitcoin being immutable and other things, does not withhold it to then be regulated. I guess you're saying the attributes of it can be separate.
You can't regulate the Bitcoin protocol. Like you can try, but you can't. Like the same way you can't regulate gold. It's like if the regulators are actually, gold, you're too brittle. Can you change your chemical metallic bond properties? Like,
no.
How is it gonna work? Like, you can't create laws to regulate the metallic properties of gold, but how can you enforce it? It's the same with Bitcoin. So you can't enforce regulation to inflate or forcibly co-opt the Bitcoin network, but you can enforce regulation to make the service providers on top of Bitcoin safer and more accountable. Because the whole FTX example, I'll keep using FTX because it's probably the one that people hear about the most, but there's a lot of these cases around around the digital asset space over the years. It's like the failure of FTX has nothing to do with Bitcoin, right? The protocol level doesn't even care or know who FTX is. It just keeps ticking along. It's just agnostically going. The failure of FTX was just a governance. It's a private company, person that just doesn't respect risk in a business and pretends that they are regulated when they're not, and lie to their customers. But on the other hand, people kind of blame Bitcoin and say that, Bitcoin is this dirty asset because look, people lost money in FTX. It's like people saying that, like, someone someone bought gold and turns out that the gold is has tungsten in it and it's a fake gold, and then person's like, aha, gold is bad.
Here's
right?
the issue. Exactly.
But it's like people don't do that to gold, but a lot of times people do that to Bitcoin, which is kind of unfair. But again, Bitcoin is very new to a lot of people, so I don't blame them.
When and like you're in the circles where you would probably know, and again coming to the Signal, a lot of this, would people be surprised? I mean, I don't have to talk about names. Would people be surprised at how many of the exchanges that they operate in right now, rather in Australia or worldwide, that would go, hey, if you actually knew exactly how this is probably operating in the back end and whatnot, you'd want to be participating in regulated spaces. Is that a fair statement? Is that something that it's widely known? What would you comment on that?
So if I read the question correctly, it's like if a lot of these crypto exchange trading platform customers understand how things work behind the scenes, they would not touch it with a 9-foot pole, right? Yeah, there's some truth to it. Like if they actually disclose properly that what the truth actually is, rather than having that come part of the discovery during a bankruptcy process, and it's like, how did I know not about this? I think that's very important, is disclosures. Like people can do anything, and people can say that, well, they chose the exchange, it's their own fault, but you kind of have to put some responsibility on the operators for hiding the disclosures, or very craftily word the terms and conditions, and put themselves up in a position of trust when they're not really in that position to call themselves that. Because I think with the right disclosures, if people make the right choices, make the wrong choices, it's their own responsibility. I'm actually a very big advocate of people just running disclosures properly, because if you look at the FTX example again, like everyone during that time when FTX blew up said that, it's very common to me, you guys heard of it before, it's like, we hold assets one-to-one, right? It's like, tell me, exchange A, exchange B, tell me, are you affected by FTX? And then they say, we hold assets one-to-one, and don't tell you anything else, right? I was like, well, if you read into that, yeah, correct. The assets are still there, they're still one-to-one, but they're stuck in FTX.
Yep.
Right? So they're not lying to you by saying it's hold one-to-one, but they just can't tell you in your face that, yes, we are exposed to FTX. Where there's a couple of exchanges that are brave enough to say that, I give them really big kudos and respect. But like FTX is a very major liquidity player in the world in crypto. There's no way there's only one crypto brokerage that is exposed to that. It doesn't make any sense, right? Because for a brokerage to function, if you understand how brokerage work, is that you need to have liquidity parked at all those liquidity players. So when customers execute an order, you buy it immediately over there. Like if someone buys, Bitcoin, you use the money that you already have sitting on FTX to buy the Bitcoin. Sometimes there might be different marketplaces and they find the best pricing and things like that. But there's no way in a market participant like the FTX has only one client in Australia, right? So I think again, like in the crypto exchange is unregulated, so they don't need to tell you whether they've lost money on the FTX. There's actually no obligations for them to do so, because until the point of redemption of the asset, which is withdrawals, the asset doesn't belong to the customer. The asset belongs as a business P&L of the exchange. So if they have a massive hole for their, it's not like a bank where you have asset liability mismatch or obligations, whereas in a crypto exchange, as long as people don't withdraw the money, you absolutely have no obligation of that part of the assets. So legally, they can operate fractionally and do not have to tell you and just give you statements like, we have one-to-one assets, whatever that means, and they can get away with it. Absolutely no problem. So in a regulated product, try that, you go to jail.
And I'm going to pull from something, I don't know if it's going to be exactly right, so help me out here. There was I think it was a comment or a post you actually put a little while ago, which was, here in Australia, people would be surprised around the exchanges that are being supported by banks. And if there was a change in the wind around the regulation or the strength of things would come down, they would be surprised at what would have to happen. And I think Commonwealth Bank did this actually not too long ago, where they've actually limited the amount of funds that you can send through from Commonwealth Bank to something like an exchange out there. Does that view still hold true, where again, people, if they were to see or understand what was happening, if the wind's changed, if a particular view around how we're maybe managing these assets changed, things could move very quickly in very bad ways. I'm talking just for everyday investors in the asset.
Yeah, I guess the banks, you can't really. I mean, like they're not saints, right? We know. I mean, like they all have their own business, motives and incentives, and you can't blame them. Every private business is here to make money, right? So when the bank doesn't allow customers to transfer money to crypto exchanges, and I mean I can understand that because usually there's a lot of people that get scammed with crypto, unfortunately, because we see this a lot when I used to run a crypto exchange, right? It's like we stop a lot of those, but you can never stop the creativity of a scamming syndicate to get around any sort of protections you do. You just have to keep building higher and higher standards, and eventually the cost of monitoring and compliance is so high that only the top crypto trading platform operators can afford it. So you have all these small exchanges that are just so vulnerable to money laundering syndicates that have their ways and quirks to get around any barriers that you put up, because you cannot afford the number of staff or the technology to support the monitoring. Then you will get people that are just being exploited on the other hand, right? So eventually all this stuff stacked up to a point where the banks go like, it's just too risky for us to keep sending people that way. And do we make a decision to stop it entirely, or do we make a decision to limit it? Either way, we're gonna get smacked in the face by people that are angry. But we gotta protect what our interest, which is the integrity of the bank. So people don't lose their money, even though it is at a cost of the honest users and operators. But you think about like what can they do, right? It's like they have no good choices to make, and that is a problem where unregulated players have, because even if there are good operators in the unregulated crypto trading platform space, right? Don't deny that. But because it's unregulated, everyone can decide their own rules in a way. So there's a race to the bottom of how cheap you can run your business to expand the profits. Or you can play with hidden spreads and hidden fees with a lot of these brokerages very crafty with, but most people don't even understand because they're not sophisticated traders. But in general, like your compliance costs, your staffing costs, like these are all big overheads, especially you operate in Australia. So if your competitor is running a fraction of your compliance costs when there's absolutely no requirement to be compliant, then you will make the decision that maybe I should also halve my compliance costs. And then the next guy goes lower. So it's a race to the bottom. Given enough time, like the compliance landscape of unregulated players is just going to be close to the drain. No one's gonna front up that cost to be compliant, overly compliant, and over the top, because no one else is doing it. Right? Yeah,
there's no incentive for them to particularly do it.
Whereas in the regulated perimeter, like there's a minimum boundary that you go. Like you guys cannot go below the standard, otherwise you guys go to jail, right?
Yep.
So it's very different. Whereas unregulated players, you can do anything you want, as long as you stay outside of trouble or the perception of trouble, then you're fine. But usually you don't find out the trouble until it's too late.
Until it happens. Yeah, until it
happens.
Hits.
Yeah.
Talking about some of the larger players, we talked about BlackRock, you're talking about banks. What's your view, whether it's an and or an or, between the traditional finance and decentralized finance, right? So we're starting to see traditional finance sort of enter the space. And do you see it as being an and? So that's going to be the operations of traditional finance and also decentralized finance. Is it going to become an or if you have to start looking ahead into the future? What does that look like? And to people that maybe don't even understand that, could you differentiate as how big of a thing is it to see traditional finance really starting to enter into the space?
Yeah, I think the bigger Bitcoin becomes, the bigger market size, the bigger support it has, the bigger trust it has, more traditional players want to play into it, and the bigger Bitcoin becomes, the bigger DeFi becomes. Like it's an unintended consequence of that. And what I mean by that is that, so what we see a lot, because we work with a lot of traditional players that nobody works with in the crypto space, just because they're in a unique position that we're in Monochrome. So we understand the logic and rationale behind it. Every one of them, they are in a big bureaucratic organization for many years. Like no one wants to take the risk. No one wants to become that Bitcoin hero. So it is all about commercial decisions of like, do we take the commercial decision to enter the market, and how do we manage the risk, right? So there's always these two things, the commercial interest and the risk exposure. So the risk of dealing with Bitcoin reduces over time because there's more regulated products, there's more regulatory clarity, there's more players like BlackRock and all these guys are playing, like Monochrome is playing. So like you cannot compare the risk of dealing with Bitcoin products 2023 to 2009, right? Just incomparable. So the risk aspect goes down over time. The commercial aspect of it increases over time as well, because as more people are interested in Bitcoin, there's more volume, there's more trading, there's more services and product that people are buying and spending money on, and that aspect just becomes more and more lucrative. So we're just seeing mathematics, right? So over time, the risk of doing business is lower, and the profitability of doing business is higher. So anyone with a mathematical mind would go like, there is a point of time that we have to enter the market, no matter what we think about Bitcoin, because it's just numbers. So what we see a lot is that because the traditional markets it's already so saturated that you can make a little bit of money, but you make a lot of volume. So you kind of like go through that process of balancing the profitability with just expanding, but making a small competitive rate, still stay competitive. But with Bitcoin, there's only this many people that's doing it. Like there is a very big pricing advantage for operators that are offering the products that are the only ones available. So it's not saying that these businesses are greedy, just that the cost of doing business is higher because things are newer. People are charging more for insurance than say other stuff, etc. People are charging more for custody than other stuff. So overall, you can see that everybody is charging a little bit more just because it's Bitcoin, and that cost get passed along to the end user. So as asset managers like Monochrome, like it's not like we want to charge more than say sell you BHP stocks than sell you Bitcoin. It's just the nature of the service providers around Bitcoin is just more expensive. You just got to accept that. And that's why these service providers are entering the market, because it's like, if I can make $10 selling the same thing versus $1 selling a different thing, I would want to sell the $10 thing, $10 thing. It's just business for them. So we're start to see that people are entering the market, whether it's trading, or it's market making, or it's custody, or even offer insurance, like I mentioned. Like it's a very lucrative market for people to get into right now. So you can see a lot of traditional players are just not giving up this market at the moment. Even advisors, like I've seen a lot of advisors say that, I can't talk about Bitcoin, my licensee wouldn't allow it, or my license wouldn't allow it, and I can't get insurance because of that. It's like, first of all, like you can get insurance today, just speak to us, we can find you a provider that will provide you gap cover. We don't provide it, but we know someone that will. So depends on the circumstance that you might get something, and you can wrap that into the product. So if your client wants a specialist Bitcoin advice, like you can on charge all this cost that you incur as a business to them, and I'm pretty sure they'll be happy to do it because they feel safer doing it through their advisor because they trust you. And then you can tell them that this is just the cost of doing it. I understand, sir, madam, this is more expensive than your the cost of advice, or the advice fees is a bit more because it's Bitcoin. But you make the decision whether you pull the trigger or not. Most likely they will say yes, I am happy with that because I know the uniqueness of the asset class. Most advisors kind of restrict themselves to go like, this doesn't work, that won't work, this won't work, that won't work, and then they lose out to the advisors that are just more proactive. And people are just going to all these new Bitcoin-centric advisors. You see that in the US, see that in Australia, like my friend Pete Dunworth. You see that with Ministry of Notes. We see that with like BTC advisors, and even on some of the traditional ones that we won't name because we're closely working with them on stuff. So like there are a shift of guards across the board, from unregulated cowboys to regulated players, whether it's a fund manager or a custodian or a advisor, and people just need to stand on the right side of history, right? So I think our message here is just to make people aware that things are changing. there is really no excuse to stay out on the market. Every problem that you can ever imagine that you will face has been faced by your peers, and they've solved it, whether with us, with someone else. And your best chance is to just start looking into it properly, and don't think it's a career risk to just be ignoring about Bitcoin, because I know that most of them believe about Bitcoin. It's just they think it's a career risk to bring that to the table. But it's with all this entrance with traditional players like BlackRock. If you extrapolate the next couple of months, if the ETFs get approved and things starts going to the positive, like, it is a career risk to be clueless about Bitcoin, right? It's like like the guy in the office that doesn't know how to use Microsoft Excel. It's like, what the hell is he doing here, right?
Yeah, so, and I was going to say, I think that you're answering this question that I was going to pose. Basically, if you're seeing it, accelerate in the uptake of, advisors and the like who are wanting to participate, but it really does sound like it's going to come to an inflection point where if you're not offering those, you're now on the losing side. You are on the side where people are not going to be coming to you because they want to be operating within that system or want to get some advice on that asset class.
That's right.
So, but, and even, with that, are you seeing that personally through Monochrome? Are you seeing that the acceleration of people either coming directly to Monochrome or even to yourself is increasing? In terms of that, the amount of people talking about it,
especially after the BlackRock news, I think it's like we love to see traditional players enter the market, because it basically validates what we have been telling the market, that they should take this seriously. This is the future. You're not betting the farm on this, so like, you're a small allocation and things like that to do it, to observe. So it's not like you're taking an exceptional amount of risk to put your farm into. It is a very specific niche asset that goes into some people's alternative baskets. But the problem is that a lot of people just don't want to learn to do it properly. And then there's a consequence of advisors not able to address the need of Bitcoin. The customers might go to an unregulated exchange and hurt themselves because they can't get the right advice whether to do this or do not do this. They just see the stuff in the news and see the celebrity endorsement on this app and that app, and then they get burned. Or they go to someone else that is giving them good advice and good guidance, and they might one day bring the other portfolio, all the asset under advice to the next guy that can do it properly. So I think there is a phenomenon, like the advisors that are open to it, like they work with us very closely. I think we're very fortunate to have a lot of supportive advisors that are working on this stuff. They offer us like, well, can we do this, or can we explore this, or can this be interpreted in this way, because then it'll make this easier for us, or actually it is this way, so happy days and that kind of stuff. So, and also with insurance, with an ETF, it makes it even more easier for them to allocate or to put into an advice, or even like create new products that are compatible. Because the biggest problem is insurance, right? And as an advisor, your biggest problem is that if your PI cover doesn't cover the stuff that you're dishing out and collecting fees on. So that's what has been the longest problem with Bitcoin products. But with the introduction of regulated products, they are just securities. There might be unlisted listed securities. Some insurance companies don't even see that as Bitcoin. They don't even consider that as crypto. And even some might consider them crypto because they're crypto-backed assets. There are ways for advisors to get gap covers for other insurers and underwriters to do that. And they can wrap this, like I said, it's not additional cost to the business. They can on-sell exactly the stuff to their clients, right? Because these are not major expenses considering the skill of a lot of these advice firms. So I think there are also the opposite side. There are people that are just very, very not aware that things are evolving way past them. They just like hide within their shells and like, no, like this is not happening. Like, they just like, this will just go away. Just go away. Yeah. I don't really believe it's happening. Maybe they even like question the validity of the BlackRock news and refuse to go into the SEC website to click because they're too afraid to face reality. I don't know, but poor thing. But I think that there is a consequence to that either, because like if you don't prove yourself to be that trusted source of being able to make decisions to invest or not invest, to do the right research on behalf of me as a client, to provide me the right advice, and just constantly no all the way, and then this whole thing is taking off, this everyone, even your biggest competition, is into this anymore. Like, why should I trust you with the other advice that I'm getting? Like, it's like, if this happens to this asset class, would it happen to other asset classes? So as a result, we've seen some advisors are losing the grounds on the trust when it comes to Bitcoin and crypto asset advice, and to a point that the clients don't even ask them anymore. The clients talk directly to us. But our message is that you should always work with your advisor, because if the more you come to us, the more you jump the hoop, it's good for us, but it's not good for the other clients in the advice practice, because the advisor interprets that you're no longer talking to them, but you're talking to us directly, as there is no more demand. It's like, well, my clients aren't asking about Bitcoin anymore. Happy days. I continue, selling my fixed income shit, right? So I think it's very important for advisors to work closely with us, so that they know that there is demand on this. They can't just interpret because I've been telling people to go away, don't talk to me about Bitcoin for years, and now finally nobody's talking about Bitcoin. Nobody trusts me on that topic. Yep. And then I interpret it as like, haha, like no one wants Bitcoin anymore because I'm not getting any calls. Right? It's like, it's wrong to view it that way, because there are very progressive and really good advisors in Australia that are already absolutely on board with that. So they have to, integrate this change into their practice, and it's a mindset shift, right? It's not anything technical. There's no legal barrier. There's no regulatory barrier. There's no insurance barrier kind of anymore. There's no reason why they cannot do it. It's mainly just psychological most of the time we observe.
Well, it's a big piece of, innovator die, and, that's seen in companies, that's seen in individuals, and especially when a market moves, relatively quickly, and people could say, right, Bitcoin's been around now for 14 years or something like that. It's, hey, things are moving quickly, and some individuals who've probably been in that industry longer than that go, this is going to pass over, this is going to fade over. There's the same thing we talk about with companies like Kodak or, Blockbuster, right? You don't innovate, you think it's going to pass, and sometimes it does. This doesn't smell like it is, going to go do that. As we're seeing traditional really big players come in, it's no, get on board, innovate, change over, or else, you are not going to get people communicating with you. One thing before we move off this particular topic and look into the desserts for today's little degustation, I was going to say, I actually did my own little bit of research as well. And if you go to the Monochrome website right now, you could go through and you can see the financial license that's right in front of there. You can go and look through the ACNs and find out all those details, which equivalently I try to do a similar sort of search in the big popular exchanges, and it is much harder to do something of the equivalent nature. So I said, people want to go and do their own research, go do that. You can find that information. It's pretty easily transparent. I don't know if you can make any comment about, I went on the website and I saw something. I saw Monochrome Digital Exchange coming soon. What is that Monochrome's offering there? Is that something that can be discussed? Is that something that you can share at all here with the podcast and the Immortalites?
Well, there's a lot of initiatives and projects that we're working on. Some might be investment that we've made. Some might be joint ventures. Some might just be side projects that we're working on, because for us to be de facto leaders when it comes to regulated crypto asset product offerings, we can't just be doing funds. We just can't be doing ETFs. We have to explore building out rails that are on the fringe as well. So trading is one of the things that I think is very important, because it just provides liquidity, feeds liquidity back to the market, make the markets more efficient. So maybe you'll see something. I won't go into detail what will that become, but I'm pretty sure you will see that in due course. But our biggest news probably when this goes out would be that our updated Bitcoin ETF, spot Bitcoin ETF filing is back on the table now. So we filed that with ASX just today, the day of the recording. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Like we're slow. We're not fast. We're not fast moving. You probably see a lot of things that are there for like a long time, but we are working very hard. Just that the wheels of the regulatory piece is just slower than anything else. It's not as quick as the Wild West. So
but to get it right, and look, I operate in a lot of federal government space here in Australia. Look, things do move slower, and that's the reality of things. It's not going to move like a startup. But there's also, as you say, regulations and certain boundaries that are put in place and structures to work in the favor of your end consumers, which is here we're talking about retail individuals who are going to be operating and wanting to be safe. I want to sort of finish off and ask you couple of questions, and it's more so around experiences. And we're going to talk about a little bit about GT4 Australia. And I want you to tell me, so make sure this is right. Round 3, Queensland Raceway, August 11th to the 13th. I believe it's that third round for Monochrome GT4. So Monochrome, let me get this straight, they're sponsoring GT4 Australia to actually go through the entire series. So I wanted you to speak a little bit, and I know you've got a passion for cars and racing and driving and the like, and maybe to explain to people who are listening at home and trying to even put themselves in this position, because I was a huge fan of Formula One when I was growing up. Juan Pablo Montoya, used to watch it with my dad, Colombian. We used to watch it all the time. We'd stay up, you'd watch it, you'd be amazed. I don't so much watch it as much anymore, but I never actually went to an actual race. For people who've never been to a race, perhaps of a car racing, why support GT4 Australia? Why you see the livery on the actual cars themselves? And how would you try to explain to someone who's never been to a racing event before what the experience might be like, or where the joy is in the racing event on that particular day?
I guess we do support a number of athletes and teams and even categories, like you mentioned, the Monochrome GT4 Australia, and mostly just focusing in the Australian market because it's where we operate in. Other than a passion of motorsports, I think motorsports is just a very good grounds for networking for high net worth individuals that are just and also have attuned to a high risk appetite. Because then the motorsports, it's a very risky sport, as you can imagine. So we find a lot of success in people that are just very much aligned with, say a product like Bitcoin, but they want to do it properly because these guys are very sophisticated investors. They know exactly what they're looking for, and they know the risk, but they want to make sure that they understand high conviction on the asset class, but low conviction on the way to access it. So we help bridge that market, and funnily, like a lot of financial professionals and executives love motorsports. So you get a lot of high quality networking that you wouldn't otherwise get normally either. So people see the consistency of our involvement in motorsports, whether they're good day, bad day, we show up, that kind of stuff. We've been doing the Porsche Carrera Cup for the third year now. We've been doing GT4 is the first category that we picked up because it's a new category that came up, an opportunity that was offered from a friend that is involved with the category buyout. So, and we made a lot of friends right away. It's not crazy like Formula One. And Formula One, you're paying that Formula One premium in sponsorship. And also it's more diluted as an audience because it's more global. And I feel that, having support on drivers and motorsports is also, in a way that you feel happy because you kind of see people succeed all the time. Mm-hmm. And you kind of want that feeling of you're helping people achieve their goals and achieve what they want, and you're there. It's unlike just other regular sponsors, we show up a lot in a lot of these stuff, test days, in their races. We try to make it as much as we can. I've been in all the rounds of GT4 this year, even with the practice round at QR and earlier the year, and you kind of build a family around that because you go through the ups and downs with them. There's a lot of ups and downs in motorsports. You go through the people. You go through all the emotions, right? Happy, angry, sad, despair, disappointment, excitement. Plot twists, all this stuff. And I think it's just a very nice place to be in, compared to, say, a sport that is more boring. I don't want to name any examples, but there's a lot of excitement in motorsports, and you build better relationship, I feel, when there's a common interest, and when also there's a common shared experience of these roller coasters of emotions.
Can you explain that in maybe either an example, or so I'll give you a note. Most people who might not watch racing, yep. And so I can reflect back on watching it on TV. There is a storyline to each race, right? That people, if you really pay attention, I can remember, maybe not the specifics, but I can remember the battles between Schumacher, Juan Pablo Montoya, quite a few Heineken, right? And watching it and being amazed at what could happen. And really, you think 70 laps going around a particular circle, man, that's got to get boring. No, it doesn't. There's a lot of little inflections that would happen. Is that even is that enhanced when you're actually at the race in person?
Well, I think the TV adds a lot of drama to it.
Okay.
Like if you're actually at a Formula One race, like you wouldn't even know what's happening because like so many people, you don't see the drivers, you don't get to see into the paddocks, you don't know what's happening. And one day you watch Netflix and it's like, oh, that happened. It's like, oh, cool. But with a more regional and grassroots race that are not crazy with the number of like fans internationally and whatnot, while the cost of participation is lower because you get more types of people into it, not just your billionaires. You get people that are just high-paying executives into motorsports. A lot of them to dads that want to get their son into motorsports because that's their dream when they were younger. And I just feel that people, like, you answer the first question, is that people should come to some of these races because they're not expensive to go. Like, you don't have to spend like 10 grand, 30 grand to go to the Monaco Grand Prix just to experience it or see any cars. But some of these events, they're mostly, some of them are free anyway, and you get to experience more because there's no like security blocking you to take 2 steps forward and stuff like that. You get to see into the paddocks. Most drivers and mechanics, they're friendly. They'll tell you anything you want to know about the car. And obviously we have the really competitive ones, like the most competitive, I would say, supercars. Like, there's more restricted access, ticketing is a bit more expensive, but it's fun. Like, you feel the V8s, you feel the engine, the things that you don't feel in the TVs, the noise of it, like how loud it actually is. Like, you can tune up the TV as loud as you want, but it's actually not real. The haptic that you feel when these cars are on the pit limiter doing on like 9,000 RPM flying down the pit lane, like, you actually feel like your heart is actually like beating extra because of that that vibration from external. And also, like, there's a lot of stories that people they can meet, or interesting people and characters that you find along motorsports. But I guess like even the GT4, like Monochrome GT4 Australia, it's basically a in-between race, right? It's one up from production cars, which, like, you got your anywhere from a Mazda to an M4. With GT4, it's factory built race cars, but they're not as quick and crazy as a GT3 car, which is pro racing, and people do like Spa 24 hours and stuff and then go to Le Mans. Like, GT4 cars are just one step down from that, and so you get a lot of people that are not there professionally. They're not paid to drive. They're not like young sponsored 20-year-old driver that don't fear death. You get a lot of people that are just accomplished businessmen or women, or people that are just happy to be there. So I feel that of all the categories that we've supported and been to, the Monochrome GT4 feels the most homey. Like, everyone competes and everyone have pizza, and at the end of the day, like good luck with that in supercars, right? So, but I guess, like, you should try experiencing all of them. They're all different and all have their own quirks. And you make good friends along the way. And if it helps the business, help the business. But you don't force. Like, we're never the kind of business that try to force and sell you something. Like, most of our sponsorship don't even mention the product. Like, we don't even tell you what we do. We're just happy to be there. And then if you want to talk to us. And we throw some events. Sometimes we bring our clients to these places. They might get interested in the sport. They might get into it. They might not. But also, you also have the drivers who then talk to our clients and actually understand what we do from other people's perspective. And we find that that's the most success out of this, because people like to hear the testimonies from people that have experience with the product that are not related to the business, than coming directly from the horse's mouth sometimes.
No, certainly. And I'm going to take you all the way back. So we're going to go all the way back to one of these original questions that I was posing to you, which was, you were talking about Ferrari and Lamborghini and sort of who buys these things. And one thing that I see quite often is I know people who've own different supercars, and you see the groupings, kind of like a little bit of an association. They say, like, family of people who own Lamborghini, and they do Lamborghini days, and you got Ferrari and they do this, and you'll go over there. Can you comment on, of all those different groups of varying things that you've seen before in the past, which one for people looking maybe externally in, or perhaps might be, hey, I want to make a choice to buy a supercar, and I'm going to do it for the family or the group or the ambience. Is there one that you kind of like tip your hat and go, the one that does it really right, that you might not think of is surprisingly X, or it's this one, or perhaps not this one? Is there a comment to that?
Well, I guess like Ferraris are expensive, right? But they have the prestige, so they usually are the hardest to get, like especially the limited edition ones, like the A12 Competizione, or even a couple of years back the Fuori Pista. You got to buy the GT4 Lusso to even get it, and people sell it right after when they have the car. So with Lamborghini, it didn't used to be this hard to get Lamborghinis. In the past, you can just walk in a dealership and order one, but these days you've seen since COVID, like it's just so hard to get everything. And Lamborghini don't particularly do limited cars either, so it's not like there's a shortage or a number allocation that can do. So about the Sterrato, like the last V10 that I ordered, like that's limited to 1,499, I believe. But there's a production capacity as well for each run of the car, because like Lamborghini's phasing out the ICE engines, and I think they've announced that they've produced their last pure internal combustion engine, so they're moving on to the hybrids. So the new Revuelto, the V12 hybrid, that's also really hard to get these days. So like it's hard to get cars these days, like the good ones. And I think that just like, but the entry level supercars that are still very attainable, like I believe Aston Martin makes really good cars, even though some people say that they're just Mercedes engines, but I think that they're really pretty. Unfortunately, they don't quite have the same, cult following as like the
it's interesting that they don't. It's interesting they don't have the same allure.
Like it's quite sad. Like I think since Alonso got into a Aston, I think still has kind of been a bit people have that trust back to the brand. I hope it continues. Lotus does very affordable two-seater sports cars. Like the Lotus Emira is like, you can't imagine like how good for value that car is. It's like even with the tax in Australia, it's like early 200s on roads. I can't imagine like a two-door car that looks exceptional, a supercar. It looks almost exactly the same as the Maserati MC20, but it's like a third of the cost. I think that will be popular among like entry level people that want to jump up from their M3s or into something. You see people usually start with an M3, they go to maybe a GDR, and then they get an R8, and they go from there. But I think the new manufacturers out there doing a good job to bridge that gap. McLaren is always very good because their cars are very good for value for what they're expensive, but you get so much value out of the car. I think for the cool factor, you get the doors goes up. That's one thing. Like you got to spend a lot of money on Ferrari, like the La Ferrari or the Enzo to go doors goes up, which most people can't afford to buy. Lamborghinis, you got to get the V12s, which now starts at over $1 million. But with the McLaren, you can any car like from the MP412C to the 570, 650, 720, even to the Senna, all the door goes up. They're quite equally, attainable from that point of view. So I like that as well. One of the brands that we missed that are worth mentioning, I guess Porsche, but Porsche, I love, we've been very big supporters of the Porsche Carrera Cup, the One Make series. I don't particularly have a lot of desire to get a Porsche. I respect the history. I love a lot of that. The 964s are getting very popular again because of all these companies like Singer. 964s, Porsche 911s are, I think, one of the best looking Porsches ever. The new GT3 RS is awesome. I think there's a carbon shortage, so the YSA packages are getting delayed, so people are switching back into the base models, the non-YSA one. So I think that's worth looking into. They're not that crazy if it's non-YSA. So, but it's hard to get one. It's hard to get any good cars these days. And then another thing that most people don't appreciate is like the station wagons. If you want something practical, like the RS6, RS7 from Audi is great. The BMW M5, M5 CS, they're great. Even I guess some of the SUVs these days are crazy, right? the Aston Martin DBX 707. It costs about the same price as the Lamborghini Urus, but I think heaps more fun driving the Aston. But most people drive the Urus anyway. But one car that I have on order, I believe, now I think about it, is the V12 Purosangue by Ferrari. But I don't think I will get an allocation because I'm not a very
dedicated Ferrari.
I'm not a very distinguished Ferrari owner, right? I'm not have like 10 Ferraris at home, so that's a problem.
I guess that's the interesting thing, where as it goes with time, it's just the exclusivity of it. It's just going to be able to provide for the ones who have been providing them for a while.
But I think there's two more categories of cars that I think people should consider as well, because like I've been there, done that. Like I don't feel that the only thing that you can achieve or show off wealth or success is a supercar. I think there are two types of stuff. Like some people go to programs like Lamborghini have the Essenza program, Ferrari have the FXX program, and these are like exclusive programs where you buy the car. They're not cheap. They're quite expensive, and you can't bring them out. They're not road legal. You can't take them out from the factory. The factory manages for you, but you get like money can't buy experiences because they're so exclusive. You get a race on the track with all this like unhinged, V12s that are straight pipe and everything that loud as hell. I've been to one of the events that like that. Like those are things that you wouldn't get to brag. You can't drive it down the street and rev it next to your friends or jealous pedestrians.
You're not going to have the Ferrari FXX with the big coin plates going down the road.
Yeah, but with those programs, you get like money can buy experience that you can share with very close friends and family. There are people that would like that. I personally prefer that. But there are also other types of cars that are not expensive, but they're just very refined of like the people who are even aware of them, right? So like what we call the post-wealth car.
Right.
So it's like, well, you got the millionaire driving the Ferrari, but then you got a billionaire driving a car that is like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, what is it? Yeah. Is this when you're going to mention the Abarth?
Well, I think the classic Fiat 500 series, the classic Abarths, they make a lot of those cars back in the days, but the resto mods are very interesting. If you go to, I spent a bit of time in Monaco, so you can see that a part of the Bugattis and all the crazy cars that you see there, like you have a lot of these weird small cars, and one of those very commonly are like really pristinely restored Fiat 500s or really old cars that most kids these days have never even encountered because the company doesn't exist anymore. I think those are cool. Like you don't have to be fast or it costs this much, bro, that kind of stuff. But I think it really comes into what you like, right? It's like you want a variety. Like if you all you want is to show off and go fast, then maybe get one of the quick ones you find. But if you want to experience the streets of Rome and up, the top down next to the French Riviera, like that kind of stuff. Like you would also maybe consider something that's more quirky. So that kind of post-wealth car I talk about. Some of the cars that are in Australia that people don't see a lot is like cars that people don't. Reason why is because they don't make it available in Australia. Like I think one of the cool cars that you can own is a Toyota Century that looks just so boss. Yeah. And there's there's a big Toyota Century community where people import cars all along because they make them for a long time. And then there is also the new Toyota Century that came out in 2019 in Japan, but I don't think they make it available in a lot of places. Maybe only in Japan. But I've seen a couple in Japan, and they're like probably the street presence of those cars, like a Rolls Royce can go to bed. Like these cars, like some of these cars that are not available in Australia, but you can import them. I've seen people done it before. Like it's just not the couple of the big brands that you can recognize, but there's a lot of these. Some like most people don't even know Toyota Century exists, or there's like a new updated Toyota Century that is more modern. Even Honda, for example, they have the Honda E, which is a electric car that came up in announced in 2020, but they started making it between 2019 to 2021. So about through 3 years of production time. So I see them a lot in Monaco, but I don't see them in Australia very much because you only can import them. I think Max Verstappen have one. Maybe that's why it became very popular.
Became popular as well.
But it's like the only electric car that Honda manufactures. Like it's terrible value for money. That's why nobody buys it. But it's one of the most beautifully designed cars like I've ever seen. It's like, you know, the designer for the McLaren P1, the designer for the Fiat 500 initially, Frank Stevenson. Like he has a YouTube channel where he rate designs for cars. Because he's like the design god of like cars, right? Designed some of the best cars ever. And the only car that I've seen him giving a 10 out of 10 is the Honda E.
That's amazing.
So I've actually have one. It's not here in Australia, but I do like sort of also have some of these quirky cars that nobody really cares about, understands, because it's not just about all the attention that you're getting externally. Like it's really like your internal gratification. Like you did well, you want to reward yourself. Then you're not about like, hey, look at me, that kind of stuff, because that's a bit like it's not really. Some people like it, some people don't. I don't like it, but it's and to their own taste, right?
It's a good point. Look, I've talked to other people, and some don't share that view, but I have a good friend. I'll keep his name out of it. We've had him on the podcast before though, and he did a very similar thing. You know, he's buying a brand new, I think it's a Lamborghini Sian, I think it is, that he's going and arriving. But he's also really into buying the really fun cars, the quirky cars. That most people, to you and me and others, maybe not mean much, but it's like post-wealth where that's really, that's the good fun. So I might just chat about that offline. We've got a final two questions for you. One is, where do you sit on the hypercars view then? You talked about a few of those there. And some people are never going to go down the path of a Pagani or a Bugatti, all those, very top level hypercars. Where do you sit on that in terms of hype? Because I know some who are Brisbaneite here, Albors, he very much is probably going to get a Pagani one day. Some don't. Where do you sit on the hypercar view?
So how do I see hypercars? I think hypercars are usually, they're not designed so that people can run it down a drag strip all the time, like more commercially available supercars. There are mostly statement pieces. They are engineered to be really exclusive, so that they hold on their prestige and also their value. Hypercars, I mean, like I love some of these ones out there. I think Pagani does a really good job, and also plus they make right-hand drive Paganis. If you ask them nicely, Bugatti, good luck with that. They won't try it. So I think that's cool. Like, but you won't buy it so that you drive it down the mall. Maybe you would if you're crazy. But it's kind of like you're buying yourself into a circle of hypercar owners that are just very exclusive, that you wouldn't otherwise get easy access to. And it's kind of like a statement, right? It's like I have a hypercar, you have a hypercar. Well, let's talk business. Yep. So I think in a lot of ways it's a social networking circle that people get into. For the love of cars, to an extent, and if it happens all together, then perfect. But it doesn't happen. That's fine, because you still got a lot of supercars to consider that have probably the same effect if you're lucky enough.
And finally, something that you posted, I believe today as well. In about 10 days, we'll hit the 800,000th block, I believe. And you celebrated Monochrome, the 700,000, with I believe a little ad on a newspaper at the very bottom of the front page. 800,000. Has anyone come through with any suggestions or any ideas about how to celebrate that 800,000?
Yeah, I think we got people say, buy another ad. I was like, it's boring.
Got to be something new.
Yeah, I think someone that suggested hot air balloons. We look into it, like it's gonna take too much time to make one. And I think some of the more reasonable suggestions, but just for the audience sake, it's like I just asked this morning, so some of these ideas are very fresh. And considering the timeline that we're trying to achieve here in 10 days, like they have to be realistic about what we can do and can't do. So I think like skywriting is one of the
that's all sort of coming into my mind.
Like sky banners or skywriting, like they write letters in the cloud, but they have like word limits and stuff, so you got to be creative in what you put in there. Probably that's what we're gonna do, but who knows? But unless better ideas come on board. Billboards, I think billboards are a bit boring, and then other stuff like parties and stuff. I'm not a big party guy. I like my cigars. Like, we go for, when Bitcoin hit 30 grand like a couple of months ago, in a long time, like I ask, like in 2 hours, like who wants to join us for a cigar? And everyone knows where Jeff has cigars after work, so they would join me then, and we shared all the cigars that we have. I haven't had one in a while. So, the office humidor is always quite full now. Hopefully I can have some reason to celebrate again. But for people's sake, it's like the Bitcoin obviously runs on blocks, right? Every 10 minutes there's a new block. So the Bitcoin halving happens every 210,000 blocks. That's really where most people hear the word blocks from. So and there's also like this geeky club of people trying to time blocks. Like they might like literally people would bid for block space in like, for example, like we just, before 700 we have like block 69696 or whatever, right? Like people were trying to bid like that block space
to
and
specifically
make sure
get down
into that. Or some people might go into like a block number that is significant because it's their birthday or something. And 800,000 block that means that it's 800 million minutes. Think about it, like 10 minutes, 800 million minutes.
Yep.
So it's 8 million minutes, so 800,000 is 8 million minutes. And that's just how long Bitcoin will be around for. So I think it's nothing cool, like, from external perspective, it was just like a bunch of geeks. But I think to celebrate the resilience of Bitcoin just, highlights that this thing is not going away. But it's cool, like, number 8 is a very auspicious number. I think it's going to be a, big event somewhere in China where try to bid block space off the block 800,000.
I was going to say it'd probably be even higher than when it gets to 88888. That's probably going to be a higher bid than it's going to be like than a million.
Yeah. People are just going to want to include that transaction so that they can show their kids next time. It's like, hey, I inscribed this or this transaction in block 8888, right? Or I maybe they time their marriage or something or something towards it. Like I did that. Like I'm married, right? So I actually have the block number of when I got married inscribed into my ring as well. I wouldn't say when.
That's awesome.
For some reason. You wouldn't expect it otherwise. Anything else from Jeff, the Bitcoin geek? But,
nah, you wouldn't.
The block numbers are kind of a way for people to prove time because you can't fake block height. So if you inscribe something into it, people use it. Some people use it as like a proof of life. Like, I wrote a message in block height. This is this, and obviously you can prove that a person is alive till then. I think in worst case, more sort of ugly, the dark side of things. But generally it's fun. People just like cool round numbers or numbers that mean something to them.
No, absolutely. Look, and I'll kind of finish it. It's weird in the Valley channels and things that we work in. There's a lot of numerology in there as well. So people will send us through 2,222 Satoshis or 222,000 Satoshis, and that'll have meanings within there. So look, numerology is a big thing, whether it's in Bitcoin blocks or 8s in China or in the Valley for Valley space and Satoshi's ascent. You can always see that. But I think I might pause here. We'll finish off here with a conversation with yourself, Jeff, and we'll finalize it with, I think if people throughout this conversation because there's a lot of detail within Bitcoin that you can go find. And again, to the touching at the very beginning, there's different signals. I would recommend people go and check out the plethora of information that Monochrome has on their website. There's a ton. Go check it out. But I think if they connect with you, connect with the Monochrome team in general, you're going to be more informed than not. And at the very least, I'd probably leave it at that for individuals in inform yourself and be prepared, because whether you're an advisor, a retail investor, a larger entity, there is change coming, as there always has been, and it will continue. Is there any final words you'd want to leave there with individuals listening to this at home?
I'm not really. I really do enjoy the chat. I think we go through a plethora of topics. Nothing too deep into that. Maybe we'll do another one separately, just if there's any suggestions or questions from the audience that they want a bit more clarity on a particular topic. So we can probably come back and do that. Like I like to talk about Bitcoin, so like if anyone has any questions, hit me up. Like if you don't want your minds to be changed, then don't bother, because I do get people just angrily messaging me. It's like Bitcoin's not going to work, and I just ghost them. It's like it's pointless trying to engage with that kind of people. But
I know what you want is The interesting thing I find every year, every time I'm looking into it, not just Bitcoin, right? There's just in broader other aspects. The more curious you get, the more you find out that there's more to find out, and the more interest and information, and you see the world in a different way. You know, it really changes.
You never stop learning with Bitcoin or anything in life. Actually, like I've done so much deep dives into Bitcoin over the last 10 years now. I've known the asset class, and I still learn new things. Right? It's like there's nothing short and nothing. There's no boring days on Bitcoin Twitter. Like like people love to make memes and stuff, and I just made like a funny meme yesterday at night on Twitter, and it kind of got a bit. People liked it. So I don't know.
You get a couple of ones that get really, really viral. There's a few things you put out there, and I think it was the fishing one with BlackRock, and that got quite a few eyeballs of people wanting to check it out. So if you want to go and see some funny memes, definitely follow Jeff along in the various socials.
You see the latest one with the gun standoff ones. Like it's
see, I don't think I've seen that one, but I'll share all the links as well below for folks to actually have a look to go and see the good memes potential that's coming out from Jeff and Monochrome. All right, thank you very much, Jeff. Appreciate the conversation.
Thanks, mate.